My YouTube channel has grown over 123,000 subscribers in just the last 5 months. We've earned over $65,000 in AdSense alone. What is my secret weapon? Well, she's here with me today. My guest today is Liz Germain, the owner and founder of Vidfluence. She has collectively helped her clients achieve over 800 million views. Her clients include people such as myself, Chalene Johnson, Tony Robbins, JJ Virgin. She started off as a YouTuber herself, but got so in deep to the analytics and realized this is what's going to make all the difference for people who really want to make their mark on YouTube.
Really, everybody thinks they have a viewer and subscriber problem, but actually they have an ideas and analytics problem.
So without further ado, I bring to you our expert, our guru, Liz. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're so cute.
Let's go.
Liz, thank you so much for joining me today here on Build Your Tribe, where we are going to break it all down.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I want to say thank you for having me as a client, because I know that I can be stubborn and I have my own beliefs about how things need to be done. I've been working with you now for over a year, and I do have to say that it wasn't until I truly was like, okay, Chalene, she's the expert. Just do exactly what she says. Even if it doesn't make sense, you just do what she says. And so you can kind of see I think we've added over 200,000 subscribers in the last year, but over 120 some odd thousand of those were just in the last 5 months, where I'm finally like, okay, everybody just do what Liz says to do.
Yeah, totally. I know it was a slow burn, but we made it. And you're actually on the exponential growth path now, which is really the goal.
I say to everyone who I recommend you to, I'm like, she is like a YouTube scientist.
Yeah.
The way she studies the numbers, behaviors, and you kind of just have to trust the data. But so many other social media experts are telling us, unless you're producing content, new people aren't seeing you. And so I kind of was reluctant to believe that. And also my thought was like, I'm going to let down that subscriber who's expecting a video from me every single fill in the blank. So can you share with us, is this a new trend, or is this something that's always kind of been there?
Yeah, so it really just comes down to how YouTube's algorithms actually work, which is very different than how Instagram or TikTok, for example, work. So social media apps like Instagram, TikTok, even Facebook video, they're all timeline bound, which basically means you do have to keep up with the rat race of constant posting. But the way that YouTube essentially works is much more evergreen. So you could post one video, and if it's a really good video and it's really valuable to the people that are watching it, that video could then perform for the next 5, even 10 years. So you don't have to keep up with this art, like an arbitrary quota that you have to meet of, oh, we have to post this many times a day. The focus on YouTube actually needs to be on relevancy to the viewer and performance and how they're interacting with the content itself. And so if we can get really good at those pieces, then we don't have to post as frequently.
I guess the belief is, or for me anyways, the thought was, okay, but if I have a video that's doing quite well, and I know a bunch of people have watched it, wouldn't I want to capitalize on that and then, give them something more so that they keep coming back to my channel?
Well, yeah. So here's the thing, and this is what we did with you, is basically what we're trying to do, especially in deploying YouTube organic growth strategy in the beginning, is studying the patterns in the content that performs the best for the particular viewer that we're looking to attract. So we have a whole process behind becoming that viewer and actually looking for the patterns in the topics that are being covered, the title structures, the way the thumbnails are designed, the way that the content is edited and put together. Because there's a big difference between like an entertainment challenge style video like Mr. Beast would do versus a more educational talking head style video. So the first thing we want to do is get really clear on who is the viewer that we're actually trying to attract.
Okay.
And then we become them and study the patterns in the content that YouTube's recommending to us most. So when you understand those core pieces, in the beginning, when you deploy the strategy, you're basically running into an experimental testing mode, right? So it's like, let's put out 10 solid videos that, based on the patterns we found when we were doing that research, have a high likelihood of also performing well. Because the reality of YouTube, it's not going to recommend your content on the homepage or in suggestions, which is really the traffic sources we're trying to get on YouTube, unless the content is really good and unless it's performing really well with the viewer that we want to attract. So in the beginning, we have to figure out what those patterns are. And we do that by looking for little breadcrumbs that other creators have dropped for us and recreating that package in your own unique way. And ultimately over time, really everybody thinks they have a viewer and subscriber problem, but actually they have an ideas and analytics problem. And
Mm.
so as you start studying the patterns in top performing content that are already being recommended to your viewers, you reverse engineer those patterns and recreate them in your own content. And then we are in close relationship with the performance data on the back end through your analytics. You can basically blow beyond any other creator out there, because 9 times out of 10, most people, they don't even open their analytics. They don't
Mhm.
know the breadth of information that's available at their fingertips inside of that data.
For me, that was a really fun part of this. I was very reluctant, as you know. I'm like, I don't wanna bottleneck myself into, like, one type of content, and you're like, "You don't have to. Let's just like, what are the types of content your girl would like to see? Let's play around with all of it. Let's just talk like, all of the types of content you'd like to produce." And then we basically narrowed it down, and, why don't you walk our listener through those buckets? Like, so I would say originally I probably had like 20 different topics. We did like a shopping haul, I did parenting advice, relationships, health talk, I did fitness workouts, I did, I'm trying to think of some of the other subjects, like a whole bunch of subjects.
You did a lash review,
Oh
remember that
yeah.
one? That one didn't do so well. Yeah. Yeah, so we basically are looking for those patterns and then creating content plans based on what's already being recommended most of those viewers. And then what happens is, let's say we put up like the first 10 videos, right? Some of them did well, some of them absolutely bombed. And
Mhm.
so if we put out 10 videos, 2 or 3 of those are probably going to do better than the rest. And that's really where stacking upon your top performers comes in. So ultimately, when we identified, okay, your particular audience is really interested in fat loss support, hormone health, and midlife conversations, essentially. When that started to emerge and we started to see those patterns, then I was like, okay, cool, let's double down on that. It's also another big thing that came up was like foods to eat, or like skincare products to use that are
Yeah.
better for you than what you can buy at the
Yeah,
store.
that was
So we
kind of
started.
crazy, like, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but, like, that was such an unexpected, like, "What?" I mean, I don't think either of us would have expected that the video I did on being a mouth breather
Yeah.
kind of catapulted all these other topics.
Yeah, it's kinda like a little, you basically planted a flag in this kind of combination of like biohacking, but also healthy, natural, organic prevention techniques and health support. And so we did some spin-off topics based off of that, especially from the patterns that we saw in that one particular, hey, this video tightened my jawline overnight, or whatever it was, that original video. It's like, what else can we do where we can also show a 2-panel transformation in the thumbnail? And that's when you brought up the castor oil.
That specific example, because I think if we share this specific example, people can think about their own spin-off. So, what I did was a video talking about how I started doing mouth taping, and I had done mouth taping um, for the reasons like I was having dental care issues and dry mouth. And then I discovered, and I just mentioned it in that video, that I discovered I felt like it kind of made my jaw longer, like more defined. And then you were like, "Okay, take a look at these comments," and you helped me come up with some, I guess you would say, adjacent or spin-off topics. So, walk people through, like, what they would be looking for to identify their own spin-off topics.
Yeah, so basically one of the easiest things you can do is go inside your analytics and look for the videos that got the highest amount of watch time, highest conversion rates as far as adding subscribers, highest impression rates, highest view rates. Basically look at your top performers. And one of the easiest things you can do is just make a remake of that particular top performer, or make a tangent spin-off of it. So that's what we
Mm,
ended up doing, because there's only so many times you can talk about mouth tape, right? But
right.
it's like, what is the actual value proposition of that? Why did people like that particular topic so much? And what else is kind of related to that that we could also provide similar value in the same type of format
Right.
within? And so that's where I asked you specifically, like, okay, when it comes to face tightening, like, is there anything else that you do with transforming your face, especially, 40 plus? That's a very common, very relevant thing that every woman goes through. So, what else can you give them in that regard? Because we're looking at, this is the value they got out of that original video. based on what their core desires are. So the core
Mm-hmm.
desires, like the lizard brain things, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do I, find a mate to live my life with? How do I elevate my status in society? Like, there's some essential core psychological desires that human beings have. And so what we discovered with that original breakout video, which is what we would call a video that outperforms your typical average, those are really the videos that we want to figure out, how do we turn this into a group of related videos that are similar and have the same type of value proposition.
Okay.
And so when I asked you that question, you're like, oh, I know what I'm going to do, because I've been starting to use castor oil. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about castor oil and how that can change your skin, and how that applies to this core issue of wanting to feel more desirable, of wanting to belong, wanting to, be perceived as attractive, especially as we get older.
Mm-hmm.
And the video just popped off. And so from there, it's like, all right, how do we now double and triple and quadruple down on that core value proposition? So
Yeah.
there's something called, and you know this now, but there's something called the 21-day window.
Mm-hmm.
And this is essentially, if you have a breakout video, let's say you test and experiment with 10 different topics because you've found these patterns in what your viewer likes most. And you only know that because of what YouTube's already showing you when you're acting like your viewer on YouTube. Let's say you put out 10 videos, 2 or 3 of them do better than your typical average. If that's the case, in about 3 to 4 weeks after that video goes live, that's the perfect Goldilocks zone, or the perfect window of time to then re-upload a similar variation of it, or a spin-off topic to it. And so while this is not a hard and fast rule, it's like, if you miss the 21-day window, that's totally fine. The original mouth taping video that you did was, I think, a year old by the
Yeah.
time we started rolling out castor oil,
Yeah.
right? So it's not a requirement,
Right.
but it does tend to be the sweet spot for adding an additional related topic. And what it ends up being really good at is bringing new viewers that discovered that breakout video and have just seen your channel for the first time. That 21-day window is a perfect time frame to bring people back to the channel to continue watching more. And this is really important for everybody who has a YouTube channel to understand, because all YouTube really cares about is the relevancy to the viewer and the performance of the content. So if you find yourself in a situation where it's like, wow, this video did really, really well, and this could be throughout the history of the entire channel, then the next step for you as a creator is to ask yourself, how do I double down on that? How can I add more content that's similar to it? Whether it's, if it's a super old video, you could just make an updated 2024 or 2025, whatever that particular year is. There's probably new information that you have to share. Your philosophies around that topic may have shifted slightly. So it's like, let's make a better, higher quality version of that on a year-over-year basis.
Yeah.
Or the other direction that you can go is, let's figure out what these tangent topics are that have a similar value proposition, that are talking to those deep-seated psychological drivers that human beings have.
Once we have an outlier and we're like, okay, I want to double down on this. I want to maybe, do basically the same video, but in a different way. For our purposes, what we did first was a video where I talked about mouth breathing, and then also talked about lymphatic face massage, and that did well. And then we're like, okay, now let's add, and you brought it to my attention, like, there's all these trending topics. Look at those and see if any of them resonate with you. They're things, so it's authentic. It's something you're actually doing. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I do castor oil now when I do this facial massage, and castor oil seems to be trending. No one's really like talking about using the two together in that way. And so once we have this outlier, what are some of the key ingredients that you want to make sure you're replicating either in the title or the thumbnail or the first couple of minutes?
Yeah. So I would say for most creators, the biggest opportunities that you have lie within the thumbnail designs. So a lot of people, especially when they're first getting started on YouTube, they're adding in, everything in the kitchen sink inside the thumbnail. It's like, hold on, pump the brakes. First of all, we call this packaging, okay? Because if we can't get the click, it doesn't matter what the video even is. So packaging is the first foot in the door, and it's really, really important, because if you don't get the click, they're not going to watch the video anyways. So what we would consider packaging is the way the title is written and the thumbnail design itself, along with the topic that's being covered in general. Okay. Plus, we also want to be looking at that first 30 to 60 seconds, because on YouTube, if you hover over a video, it will start auto playing it, almost like a preview. So that first 30 seconds has become a part of the click decision. So when we talk about packaging, for most people, the thumbnail designs are actually the biggest opportunity that 9 times out of 10, anybody that comes to work with us actually has, because nobody trains you on this stuff, right? So like,
dude,
even though YouTube is studying this every single day. Even Netflix is studying this every single day. There's tons of consultants out there just like me who also study this because we understand the importance of it. The public and general influencers or creators or entrepreneurs, they're not taught these things. And
Mm.
so one of the biggest aha moments that I ever had that started not only helping me get better results on the channels that I own, but also helping clients like you get better results is realizing how important the thumbnail and the packaging pieces are. And what makes up a really good thumbnail is three factors. First and foremost, is it simple? And this is like, Shalene, I just told this to somebody the other day, and I think it'll resonate with your audience too. I learned this advice, actually fashion advice, from the designer of Sex and the City. And she was doing some interview at some point. And she's like, good fashion is good fashion. Doesn't matter where you get it from. But ultimately, before I walk out of the house, I always look in the mirror and I take one thing off.
That's a
And you
Coco
kind of want to
Chanel
do the same
quote.
thing with it. Yeah. It's like you kind of want to do the same thing with your thumbnails.
Yeah.
It's like you don't want to walk out of the house being overstyled and, you end up looking like a brochure ad. It's just like this amalgamation of all these different combination of things, like whether it's text and face and logos and all this stuff. It's like you have 15 milliseconds that the brain of the viewer is processing that information with, and they're going to look at the thumbnail design first. So we want to make sure we keep it super, super simple. No more than 3 core elements, right? So it's like the
That was
core
so
element could be
helpful.
like a face, text, and a graphic, or a face if it's a podcast, and maybe some text or an image in between them. So we want to try to use that rule of 3 as much as possible. Anytime we go beyond that, and Netflix has seen studies on this too. They put out a whole report about, which thumbnail images that they were using in the Netflix app actually got clicked on more, and they test this heavily.
Mm.
And they found the same thing. It's like 3 core design elements, keeping it as simple as possible is really the key. So that's the first big tip. The second thing is using color theory. So you want to be asking yourself, what's the emotion that I want my viewer to feel before I start filming the video, putting together the packaging pieces, or any of that? And we want to be using colors that are going to always pop off of a white or black background.
Mm.
So here's the main place where people go wrong with color application is that they try to add too many colors and too many different shapes, and it becomes overwhelming, and it almost just becomes, it's like you're looking at it but you're not really looking at it. Like you're driving by a billboard on the highway, your subconscious mind might see it, but it's not intriguing enough to pull your conscious attention to it. And so when we're using color theory, we want to be also emphasizing the emotion that we want the person to feel, only using a couple shapes and colors. And also, the last big tip for thumbnail simplicity and design is using some kind of element that creates curiosity and intrigue. So with this, we want to create some kind of movement or momentum or something to draw the viewer's eye in. And so a lot of the times you'll see the biggest YouTube creators in the world, they'll utilize things like red arrows that are pointing to a specific part of the thumbnail, but you can't really tell what it is.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so that creates curiosity. You're like, what is that pointing at? I want to know. Right. So it's like we're trying to make it this irresistible click decision for them where they can't not click on it. And those are the 3 core elements that most people, even if you just applied that alone, your click-through rate will probably improve quite a bit.
And what about the words on the thumbnails? Because if I'm understanding you correctly, our eyes look at the thumbnail first, and then
Yes.
we look at the title. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
So
So with that in mind, should we put in our own planning, should we say like, okay, so whatever this video is about, it needs to be in the text of the thumbnail?
yeah, so I'm so glad you brought this up because another big common mistake that I see people make is they'll repeat the text that's in the title inside the thumbnail. So they'll basically just put the title text in the thumbnail.
Yeah.
We don't want to do that. We actually want to use complementary words to the title. So if the video is like top 5 foods for easier fat loss over 40, something along those lines, then we wouldn't want to say top 5 foods for fat loss in the thumbnail. We also want to keep it under 3 to 5 words at the absolute maximum. So instead, a better combination would be like, try these, or eat this, or these work, or something like that that's complementary to
And
it.
also
The
creates
title.
that curiosity because like, what's the this that I should
Yeah.
be
Yeah,
trying?
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So you want to keep everything as simple as you possibly can. This is something that it's like apply that Sex in the City rule. It's like look in the mirror before you publish a video and just take one thing off of it and always be asking yourself, how can I simplify this down? Because we really have 15 milliseconds. It's not even a full second. So it's like the easier we can communicate this, especially using more imagery and relying way less on words, the better that it's going to actually perform.
One of the biggest most important piece of advice that you had continually given us until we finally took it was that it has to be so big. Like too many of our images were like small and they looked great on Canva. They looked
Yeah.
great if on our screen when we were designing it, and by we, I usually meant me. And I thought it looked like aesthetically pleasing, like graphically, it was all put together right. And you just kept coaching us to like, remember, it's this big, and your typical viewer, the person you're trying to attract, is over 40. She's already wearing readers. Like you have to take all these things into consideration. And so you taught us how to look at not just our own thumbnail that we designed, but look at it compared to everyone else's that's about that size.
Yeah, and there's kind of two things here. One would be the 18% rule. So we use something called the 18% rule before we publish any video with any thumbnail. We'll take the thumbnail design and we shrink it down to 18% capacity, because that's essentially how it's going to show up on mobile devices or smaller devices. And if we can't see the core elements at 18% size, then we can't use the thumbnail. And so one of the easiest things to do, especially if you have faces in your thumbnail, is instead of cropping from the waist up or even the chest up, crop from the shoulders up so we can see more of the facial expression. That's been proven to actually increase clicks when we can see complex emotions through people's facial expressions. And then there's a really cool, very helpful tool that we use every once in a while if we need to really test, okay, in all the different traffic source placements on YouTube, we kind of want to see what this packaging is going to look like before we upload the video, right? It's called thumbsup.tv. And all you have to do is just add your title and you upload your thumbnail image. And then what that tool does is it will show you what your packaging is going to look like on the homepage, in video suggestions, in the search bar, etc. So it shows you all these different traffic source placements. And then you can make strategic decisions on whether or not that's something that your viewer is likely to click on. But it really helps to actually see the packaging put together, because if you're just in isolation writing a title or you're just designing the thumbnail, you're not actually getting the full experience that your viewer is going to go through, right? So
Yeah.
thumbsup.tv is a really good tool to be able to preview that before you publish.
I'm so accustomed to using my email list to promote anything. I spent a lot of time growing my email list. Thank you for helping us to grow our email list now using YouTube. But originally, when I would produce a video, my instinct was, okay, I need to send an email to my list and let them know we just dropped this video. I need to promote it to my Instagram, etc. And and I don't know if your advice has changed, but in the beginning you were like, don't do that initially, Shalene. Like, let's let it get some traction first. And I was like, but that seems so counterintuitive. Like, why wouldn't I use my list to give it some traction? Why wouldn't I promote it using my other social media platforms? Can you help us understand why that might not always be the best strategy?
Yes, and thank you so much for giving me a mountaintop to scream this off of, because it's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, especially
Awesome.
if you have a really big Instagram audience, really highly engaged email list. It seems like the right thing to just push all your videos out to them. Everything you do on YouTube is very sensitive to traffic sources. And so there's really three core traffic sources that most entrepreneurs and influencers actually want, but they don't know that they want those yet. The first one is the YouTube homepage. Okay, so when you go to youtube.com, how do we get your videos to show up there in those placements? The second is suggested video. So when somebody's on the watch page watching a YouTube video, those sidebar recommendations, if you're on mobile, it's going to be under the video itself. And then the third one is YouTube search. Okay, everybody knows YouTube is a search engine. You can look for something, it's owned by Google. You can type in a keyword like, what outfit should I wear this this summer, or cute summer outfit ideas, or whatever it is.
How to
And
repair a
YouTube will give
concrete
you,
fountain. That's
yeah,
I
yeah,
just I
I
just
saw
Google
that
searched
video.
that.
So those are the three primary ones that we want to attract more of to the channel. Now, there's an additional traffic source, which would be considered direct or unknown or external. Okay. So external is like you sending people to the channel to watch it. Now, here's the challenge with sending external audiences either from email or from link trees and bios or Instagram stories or really any other place where they're not already on YouTube ready to watch long periods of time the videos that are on YouTube, is that when you use those external traffic sources and you send a flood of that traffic to the video, a lot of times they were doing something else. They were checking their emails. They were in the doom scroll
Yeah.
seeking dopamine, right?
Yeah,
On
yeah,
social
yeah.
media. So they might click on it out of curiosity, but they don't end up actually most of the time watching through the entire video. And so this used to be different, 5, 10 years ago, it used to be standard best practice to try to get as many people onto the content as possible. But as YouTube has evolved and has started to prioritize user experience more and more over time, when we send disengaged audiences that were doing something else to a video from these external traffic sources, they get on the video, they might watch 30 seconds, maybe a minute, maybe 3 minutes if you're lucky, but they were in the middle of checking their email. So they're going to go back to doing that. Or they were in the middle of their scroll on their lunch break or whatever it is. So they're going to go back to doing that. And we don't want that, especially in the first week of the upload. We want to give the people that are already on YouTube looking to watch for long periods of time the best possible chance of finding your content and engaging with it at much higher retention rates as possible, especially in that first 7 to 10 days. Now, after that first kind of window where the video has been up for a week or two, most of the time, unless it starts to break out and get really pushed out widely by YouTube, which you have had happen a couple of times, if for most videos, it's going to typically have a little initial spike and then the impressions will start to kind of level off. And that's really the key point of where we want to then send the external traffic to. So it's not to say don't ever send content on your YouTube channel out to your list. It's just that first week after you upload the videos is super, super sensitive because YouTube's AI is looking at all the different engagement stats. What's the retention rate? How many people are clicking through? Are they actually watching the video? And so those robots, they don't know that, hey, this person was checking email. And so they only watched a minute because they had to go back to their email. All they see is that, wow, everybody's leaving at 1 to 2 minutes in. And so they'll just basically assume that the video wasn't good. So let's
Yeah.
stop recommending it. And it can actually do more harm than good now, the way that YouTube works.
That's so crazy. The
Yeah.
next question I want to ask you, if you can explain for people, when you say we want for YouTube for people to find our content on the homepage or suggested, how is it? Is there a code? How do we get there? I mean, I know we broke down some of the things that can prevent us from getting there, but is there anything in particular other than just like, making sure you're going through this checklist, like with your thumbnail and your title in the first minute?
Oh, this is such a loaded question, but
Yeah.
yes, there is. Ultimately, we need to be studying not from, and I think this is honestly the biggest aha moment that you specifically had that has unlocked these better results for you, is that just because you think something should work or not work does not mean the public thinks the same thing. And so ultimately, as a YouTube strategist now, what I do every single day is study what YouTube's already recommending from other creators, because what we're trying to do is isolate those patterns. So those patterns will typically come up in the topics that are repeatedly covered, the way the titles are written. And if you start to look at YouTube not from an entertainment angle, but actually look at it from an analytical lens and look at what YouTube is already recommending to you from other creators, you'll start to see patterns. Okay. So, especially in the topics and the way the titles are written, the way the thumbnails are designed, or the formats of videos that really pop off within your specific industry or your specific niche, it's really, really important that you become your own viewer and study and isolate those patterns. With titles specifically, one of the biggest mistakes is that people are making their titles way too long, way too wordy. They're writing them from their expert perspective, not from the public's scope of awareness. So we want to make sure that our titles are also easy to understand and they're concise and they're under 60 characters. As often as possible, we don't want to have 70, 80 character long titles because it just takes too much brain processing power for the human mind to figure out what the video is about. If it's super long and
Yeah.
wordy, you're going to be like, oh, that's a word jumble. I don't have time for that. Right. So it's like 60 characters or less. We're using clear, concise language. We're following the patterns and top performing content within your industry as a whole. And we're also using something that we call click triggers. So click triggers are a specific thing that we teach where it's the psychological underpinning for why does somebody click on a video to begin with. And there's only about 10, maybe 15 different psychological click triggers, some of which include shock, fear, curiosity, numbered lists, authority, specific audiences, things like that, right? So it's like, how can we take an average title and make it a really compelling title that somebody can't not click on?
Mhm.
And that's really where click triggers come in too. It's like, what's the psychological underpinning for why somebody would click on a video to begin with?
Yeah.
And really, the only reason that people go on YouTube at all is three core categories. One is education, one is inspiration, and one is entertainment. And a lot of creators will have some combination of all three, but ultimately we need to really understand who the viewer is and what's actually going to get them to click. And so that's where these psychological teachings come in, because it's not good enough to just create what you feel like creating in a day.
Yeah.
There's these two concentric circles where we can create relevancy. There's what you want to say, and then there's what your viewer actually cares about and wants to watch. And where those circles intersect, that's where we create relevancy. And the only way to really figure that out is to become your own viewer. So we basically do this by creating a dummy account where it's a brand new YouTube
Oh, you're going to
channel.
give this away right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're throwing it all out there.
Okay, so if you, for some reason, we're just letting us talk in the background, pay attention, because this right here is secret sauce level
It's gold.
strategy.
It's gold. Honestly, this changed my entire career trajectory, the ability to get results for people over and over. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you the sauce. You create a brand new YouTube account and you don't interact with any other content outside of your niche. You only interact with content from your top, I don't even like to call them competitors, but it's like similar creators to you. And eventually YouTube will learn that, hey, you like that content. And so what's YouTube going to do, especially with a brand new account? It's only going to show you the best content on YouTube for what you're interested in. That's how the algorithms are built. And really all YouTube cares about is, can you get somebody to click and watch a video? The number one thing that all of YouTube's different algorithms are built to do is to increase the total watch time that somebody spends on the platform. So we're not just trying to get, a quick win where one video out of 100 does well, but that was it. We're trying to get more people to the channel that find that video that did well, but then they go on to watch another and another and another and another.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to create your content strategy, wouldn't it be helpful to see what YouTube's already recommending to your viewers? Of course.
Yeah.
So that's why we create the dummy account. We basically become the viewer. We create a brand new YouTube account. We study the patterns in top performing content. And then from there, we reverse engineer the common things that we saw that showed up on the homepage or in suggestions, 9 times out of 10. And we'll start to see specific patterns that evolve. Like one in particular that might be relevant to people in the health space is this I tried format.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I tried keto diet for 30 days. Here's what happened. I tried crypto investing for 30 days. Here's what happened. Like you'll see that particular format
We're
and it does
publishing,
well in
I tried a weighted vest for 30 days and here's what happened.
Exactly. Or I tried every single walking pad on the market to find which worked best.
Yeah.
Right. Like that I tried, basically the value proposition of that is people want to know the answers and they want to know it in a way that it's not going to cost them anything to figure out.
Yeah.
So if you can, that's just one particular example of a pattern in a format. But if you can show them that, that's very valuable to people. So as you become your own viewer, you're going to start to notice like, wow, everybody in my industry is talking about the best foods to eat or the things to avoid if you want X result or whatever it is. Those are the types of patterns that we're really looking for. And then we inject them into our clients' strategies themselves. We actually call this the DJ Khaled method. Because like it doesn't even have to be within your own industry. It could be a really good, very clickable topic within a completely separate industry. And we'll just play DJ Khaled and pull that good packaging over into your universe and reuse it, remix it in a sense, because it had such good psychological triggers that concept itself could be applied to any industry. Ultimately, you just need to understand what is your viewer already seeing and engaging with most so that you can recreate those patterns in your own content.
When we did this and took your suggestion in creating, a dummy account, I think the most surprising realization I had was that what I was seeing were not the kinds of thumbnails I would design, because I thought they were cheesy and they were like dorky or like, I don't know, just like not very elegant, if you will. But they are the thumbnails I'm clicking on. And so it's like, okay, it's not about like elegance or like graphic design or is this the most beautiful thing? For me, it was like, okay, I'm realizing what I personally want to click on are these weird thumbnails. And so I've got to look at that, number one. Number two, it helped me to learn that I thought, we as entrepreneurs, we all look at the people who are like, doing really, really well. And what we're not doing is looking at their analytics. So we can't tell that they aren't getting the kind of views that they once were, that their content isn't performing as well, and we just copy what they're doing, right? So they all have these, exactly the same branded thumbnails for every single show. And so we think, "Oh, I should have a exactly the same branded thumbnail for every single show." And, we were on one of our coaching calls, Liz, and you said I said, Should ours be really branded?" And you said, "I don't know. Do you want new viewers? Or do you want people who, like, already recognize you?" I'm like, "I want new viewers." And you're like, "Well, there you go." Then you said, which was just such brilliant and simple advice, create an eye-catching thumbnail. Don't worry about it being, like, branded. Who cares?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and I think this is tough too, especially for people. I mean, I think you would probably agree with this. Influencers, entrepreneurs, anybody that's living a self-directed life, you're used to applying what feels good to you to everything that you do in
Yeah.
your marketing, in your offers, and literally everything. It's like if it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel aligned. And there is a spectrum with that because you don't want to go so far off the map that it's like, wow, this feels really inauthentic to who I am. But at the same time, just because you like something does not mean that the public or your audience is going to like it.
Yeah.
And so that's really where that dummy account tool comes in because we can see those patterns and then, we can do our best to recreate them. But it definitely, every video we have to treat as a standalone piece of content. So whenever somebody's like, "Hey, let me just let me just do a template thumbnail because I don't have time to deal with it." It's like you're really shooting yourself in the foot because one particular topic out of 10 could have had, brilliant packaging that somebody can't resist clicking on.
It's not so much the, like, I don't wanna deal with it. Like, for myself, and I think a lot of other people, that aren't willing to invest in a coach, right? Like, you're like, "Well, why would I invest in a coach? I'm gonna look at what the top people are doing. I'm gonna copy what they're doing." And so that's what I was doing initially, was like, "Okay, I'm gonna look at, I don't know, like, Diary of a CEO, and he's got," you can always tell his thumbnails are always the same. But that didn't work, and I don't know if it's working for him. I just know he's got a lot of subscribers, so we make these assumptions, and the same is true, like, even with our Instagram students, and I don't know why I didn't apply this to YouTube, but, like, even with Instagram, we tell our students, "You don't want a branded page. You don't want all of your content to look the same because 'cause you're trying to attract new people, and the people who do already follow you, you don't want them to think to themselves, 'Did I already watch this?'"
Yeah, exactly. It kind of cheapens the content in a sense
Mhm.
inadvertently. But here's the thing about Diary of a CEO specifically. What they're doing works really well for their audience because they have a very different value proposition based on who the viewers actually are. So, this is something where I think all people need to understand. If you have a YouTube channel, YouTube channels are designed to serve a single value proposition to a specific audience. And really, your job as the creator is to figure out, well, number one, who is my audience? What do they like to watch most? And how can I kind of match and mirror those patterns? But ultimately, we want to also make sure that we're not going too far outside the bounds of the parent topic of what they're coming to us
Mm,
for. So
mm.
it's like while you're experimenting, you don't want to be experimenting forever. You can run experiments with new styles of content or new formats or new titling styles, new thumbnail designs, all of that, but you don't want to be doing that forever. Ultimately, we're trying to move a channel to the point where it has 4 or 5 proven repeatable series. So in your case, fat loss advice, definitely a proven series, right?
Mhm,
Skincare over 40,
mhm.
definitely a proven series. We could basically cover a
Fitness,
thousand different
hormones.
videos.
Yep.
Exactly. Hormone health, proven series. Like we know that that's relevant to that particular audience. So ultimately, we're trying to get a channel to the point where it has 4 or 5 of those. And they're based off of the top performers that were breakout videos that we continue to stack up on. And ultimately, that's what becomes your programming strategy for the channel. So then eventually you don't have to think about it again. So
Mm.
with a podcast channel like Diary of a CEO, the value proposition is giving regular people access to experts, right? Experts on a variety of different things. The format is always the same. It's podcast, right? It's like a 45 to 60-minute episode. And you'll notice too with that particular channel, they're putting heavy editing in that first 1 to 2 minutes because of what we call inline views, which is basically when you hover over a video before you're making that click decision, you're getting a preview of the video. It's auto playing, right? So that particular audience, because every single video is the same, and the value proposition is giving them access to people they wouldn't otherwise have access to, it's just going off the charts. But here's the thing is like we also get, this happens a lot, we'll have people come to us that they got 500,000 subscribers or 1 million subscribers, But then we look at the back end and it's like, well, are they active subscribers? And a lot of times, no, they're not. In his case, he does have active subscribers, and you can see that in the average views per video. They're very consistent. People show up very regularly. And then maybe, out of 10 videos, he might have one or two topics that were relevant to an even wider audience. And so he's pulling more people in very regularly. But ultimately, just because a channel has a lot of subscribers does not mean that they're active subscribers. So we really need to be, if you're going to play the comparison game, you also need to be looking at the average views per video on that channel. And if somebody has, 300,000 subscribers, but they're getting 1,000 views per video, what does that tell you? Right?
Mm,
It's the same on Instagram too, I'm sure.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of people buying followers on Instagram and also buying engagement. I have no idea. Is that also happening on YouTube?
I've seen a handful of cases where people have run ads to the channel to try to get subscribers, and they do get subscribers.
Oh, I mean literally buying. I mean like buying fake comments, fake followers.
I don't see that very often, but I do know that it happens. It
Sure.
is rare, but there's bot farms everywhere. It doesn't matter the platform. So people have this, like, I don't know if it's an ego thing or what it is, but it's this desire to seem.
Yes, I want to be very highly regarded, so I've got all this clout. It's so dumb. Let's talk about watch time. So, watch time, it seems as though the top channels, ha they're especially the ones who are doing YouTube podcasts, their podcasts are hella long. Like, you think about someone like Joe Rogan, who's no longer on YouTube, but, like, his were, like, 3 hours long. Someone like Huberman, it's, like, 2.5 hours long. They're these really, really long, sometimes, brambly, sometimes very scientific, but they're long form. Am always worried about, like, what percentage of the video somebody has watched through, but what is more important, how long they've watched or what percentage?
Yeah, so this is a really case by case basis type of question. And inside your analytics, you're going to see two different stats. There's average percent viewed, and then there's average view duration. For me personally, I always like to make sure the average percent viewed, so this regardless of the video length, if it's super long, like podcast format, we're looking at like between 20 to 40% is our ideal baseline. If it's a shorter 10 to 20 minute type of talking head episode, for example, we're looking for minimum 40%, but up to 60, 70% retention is kind of the goal baseline that we're aiming for. Now, the average view duration is the actual number of minutes that somebody spent on the content itself. So ultimately, both of these two it's just two different ways of looking at the same stat, the same retention stat, essentially. And I don't think that we can look at this, either one of these metrics, in isolation of the impressions, the format of the content, who the viewer is, what the overall goals of the channel are. So it's really a case by case thing. But ultimately, this is the only thing that YouTube will publicly admit. All of their algorithms are built to increase total watch time. So total watch time is the amount of time that somebody spends on YouTube, whether on your channel or somebody else's. That's what the algorithms are all built to do. And each traffic source has its own algorithm. And then there's an AI on top of that that's very smart, smarter than all of us, that's looking at over 80 billion different data points for every user.
How many different data points?
80 billion per user. It's a lot. It's a
Okay,
lot.
with that in mind,
So,
how does the so is YouTube more excited if I keep somebody on one video a really long time, or is it almost equal if I can just keep them on my channel for a prolonged period?
yeah, so again, it really just depends. Who's the viewer? What's the format of the content? What's the value proposition overall of the channel that's being provided? So if you have a podcast channel, we don't have to have as high of average view duration as if we have, standard 10 to 15-minute length videos. If we have an hour, somebody could watch, 10, 20% of that, and that's still producing like 10 minutes of total watch time for us. Versus if we have a 10, 15-minute video, somebody watches, 60, 70% of that, maybe it's like 7, 8 minutes. Right. So it's like we really need to get clear on what is the value proposition that we're providing for the audience and stay consistent with that. Now, with podcasts in particular, and really with any channel, any value proposition, any viewer, no, we don't just want one video to do really well. We want that one video to then lead them to another and another and another and another. So in the kind of context of what YouTube cares about when it's making recommendation decisions of whether to push your content out to new viewers and even returning viewers, that's one of the core things they're looking at is like, does this video contribute to them going down a rabbit hole of related content, which is really increasing the total time that they spend on YouTube. So the more that you can align yourself with that goal, the better that you are in the long run, because that basically means you're linking arms with YouTube's business goals. And whenever you do that, it's always a smart thing to do. So on a per video basis, we don't necessarily want, like, it's very unrealistic to try to aim for 90, 100% retention on every single video you do. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But the total watch time that your channel is producing, especially individual videos that are producing significantly higher numbers of total watch time, those are the ones that we really want to be looking at and trying to figure out how do we do more of that? Because that's what YouTube wants.
Are the playlists an ideal way of making that really easy for people to stay on a rabbit hole with you?
Yeah,
I
so
would assume.
this is really a do the right thing at the right time type of thing. But we do in the beginning when you're experimenting with different relevant topics that might do well based on the patterns you found in top performing content. Eventually, over time, you'll start to see, okay, these are the core 4 or 5 series that we're just going to keep rolling out. With playlist strategy, that should really only come in when you start to understand what are the categories, right? So what are these groups of related videos? Then we put those into playlists, and we can boost the views with playlists because we're intelligently grouping the videos. And so it's kind of two-sided. Like one side of it is, hey, we're going to serve you more of the content that based on your engagement patterns, we can just see in the data you want more of that content, right?
Mm-hmm.
So part of it's for the viewer, but the other side of it is to basically assist YouTube's AI in creating data relationships between similar videos. And the more that we manually assist the AI in understanding that, hey, when somebody watches video A, they're very likely to also enjoy video B and C and D and E, which is really the function of a playlist or function of, target video links and cards, end screens, links in the video descriptions. Like we always want to be telling the viewer, here's the next best thing for you to go watch. And so playlists are just one way that you can do that. But ultimately, it does help to assist YouTube's AI in understanding, hey, there's a data relationship between these videos. So let's start recommending it more when somebody comes across the original video.
I don't know all of your clients, obviously, but the ones that I do know are all over 50 and freaking killing it. Is is that just who I know, or is this kind of your forte?
Yeah. Um, well, we have a good handful of very well known clients, including you. But it's really all ages. I've helped people that are, 19 years old and they
Mm,
don't know what they want to do in the world, but they
yeah.
just know they really love painting. And so it's like, all right, cool. Well, let's figure out how you can just paint for the rest of your life and get paid for it. Right. So it really, the things that we teach will work in any industry, for any age group, for any channel style, because it's based on how YouTube's algorithm actually works and
Yeah.
also how human beings behave.
So I guess then, maybe a better question is, to speak directly, because I had a lot of viewers that come specifically to this channel who are midlifers, right? So they're 45 and older, and they're kind of stepping into the second phase of their lives. Like maybe they had been a chiropractor or a nurse or a stay-at-home mom, and now they're like transitioning, and they are understanding that they have more they want to share with the world, and a lot of them want to start a YouTube channel, want to build their own personal brand. So I guess, looking at so many of the clients that I know that are over 50, even over 60, that are killing it, is is there a desire? Is it harder to break in if you're a certain age? Is it easier?
Yeah. So, with strategy and content planning, one thing I will say that's really important to get here is that we do everything based on the generation that you're looking to attract, because the way Gen Z interacts with content is so different than Gen X,
Yeah,
so different than millennials, even
yeah.
so different than boomers, so different than Gen A that's coming up and they literally are growing up with, VR headsets and glued to devices and the whole thing. And so that's a really important consideration
Okay.
to think about is like, what generation am I most likely to resonate with? And so it really doesn't matter the age of the creator themselves. What really comes up is like, if you want to target Gen Z, for example, okay, well, then we probably also need to include short strategy because they grew up with short form content. If we're going after Gen X, we probably don't actually want to include any short strategy at all. So ultimately, it's not that it's easier or harder. It's more just really understanding who the viewer is that we're looking to attract and understanding what they're most likely to engage with. And anyone can do that. It doesn't matter your age. There are people that, doing toy unboxings that aren't even, legal limit to age to drive. And then we've got on the other end of the spectrum, dad advice for people that, they don't know how to fix their sink. And there's this like 60-year-old guy that's like, hey, nobody ever taught you how to do this. I'm going to teach you how to do, like, all of it is welcome on YouTube.
That's a really good point that you've just made. You can break in at any age, but you have to know who it is you're targeting. And just to kind of illustrate that point, when we were doing some of this testing, my demographics on Instagram are considerably younger than they are here on YouTube. And so we kind of played with some different formatting, which you were very upfront in saying, like, okay, so here's a way we can test a thumbnail that is probably going to appeal to a younger audience. And it's probably not going to appeal so much to a Gen X audience, but let's test it. And I love the fact that in real time split test some of this stuff. It's pretty fun because without the analytics, you're just gonna it's so frustrating. You have no idea what you're doing, and you put together this masterpiece, and you spend all this time, and then, you hit publish, and it just flops, and it shouldn't have, and it probably wouldn't have if you were really looking at the analytics, but, at least for someone like me, to have someone who this is what they do, and you geek out on it, and you make it so simple to understand, that made all the difference in the world for me, because it really was like French.
Yeah, it's
Japanese.
huge. Honestly, that's basically, I mean, you just call me the Duolingo coach because like I teach people how to read analytics. And
Yeah,
it's a foreign language. Like I
yeah,
didn't know it in the beginning either. Our first channel, and my sister and I, we had the fitness channel. It was like I started as a YouTuber in the first like 3 to 5 years. I don't think we ever once looked at our analytics. And if I could go back in time knowing what I know now, that'd be the only thing I'd be looking at is who's the viewer, how did they get there? What are they doing when they're on the videos? Because if you understand how to read that language, you can save so much time, money, stress, and I don't want to say embarrassment because it's kind of a required thing. We call it the YouTube rite of passage. It's like you really have to leave your ego at the door because it's not welcome there. And you have
yeah,
to get yourself into the
yeah,
mindset of what can I give to other people? Even if
yeah.
just one other person sees this, will that be worth it to me? And for us, the answer was yes. But it would have been so much more helpful if we had the textbook, like the beginner crash course on how to read the data, because
Yeah.
without that we're basically just shooting blind. We didn't know what was what. We spent all this time, money, energy filming all these videos, and it's like some did well, some didn't do well. We didn't really know why. And going back, it's like, well, oh, this is the ABCs. This one did well because of this. This one did not do well because of that, right? And if you don't have somebody there that's helping you learn that language or translate it, it can be really difficult, and you spin your wheels for years potentially.
You can just be too close to it. That's what I think I was, and, so anyways, I just wanna thank you for your continued patience and support and seeing that vision and, kind of also knowing how I work. Like, that's really why this relationship worked for me, is because I just told you, this can't take a lot of time for me. This can't cost me money. Like, Liz, I've got to make money from this. Otherwise, there's so many other things I should be doing. And you're like, trust me, just trust me. We can make this make money for you. So for others who are watching and are like, okay, I get it. I would love to work with Liz. Where should they reach out?
You can find me everywhere on all socials at Liz Does Video, or if you're looking for YouTube training and support, you can go to channelamplifier.com.
Channelamplifier.com. All right. I might cut this part of the video out just because I don't really know if I want you to be giving anyone else your attention other than me and the clients I already know you have. But I'm such a loving, caring person that if you've watched or listened to this version of the podcast, okay, you deserve to have the opportunity to work with the best. I just really think you are absolutely the best. I tell everybody about you. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with my audience here today and Build Your Tribe. You're awesome.
Thank you.